The passion for destruction is a creative passion. Wow. Okay, let's just start there because that single, kind of terrifying idea, it perfectly captures the spirit of a group of thinkers who basically wanted to burn the world down just to see what would grow from the ashes. We're talking about the young Hegelians. Now, you may not have heard of them, but for a wild, fiery period in the 1830s and 40s, this small band of German intellectuals took philosophy out of the dusty lecture hall and dragged it straight into a street fight for the future of Europe. Their story is short, it's intense, and believe me, it changed absolutely everything.
So here's how this all went down. We're going to see how the death of a philosophical giant sparked a kind of intellectual family feud. Then we'll look at the one book that blew that feud wide open, and watch how a debate about God secretly became an all-out assault on the government. After that, we'll see the state strike back, and finally discover how the movement's total collapse actually paved the way for one of the most powerful political ideas in all of history.
All right, so let's set the scene. The year is 1831, and George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel has just died. Now, in Germany at this time, Hegel wasn't just a philosopher. He was the philosopher. His system was seen as the last word on, well, pretty much everything. But here's the thing about final words. They're almost never clear. Hegel's writing was, to put it mildly, ambiguous, especially when it came to two very sensitive topics, God and the state. So his followers were left scratching their heads, asking a pretty fundamental question. Did our master build a system that supports the powers that be, or did he secretly give us the tools to tear it all down? And that question split them right down the middle. On one side, you had the old or right Hegelians. These were the establishment guys. They argued that Hegel's work was the ultimate confirmation of the Prussian monarchy and traditional Christianity. But on the other side, you had the young or left Hegelians. They were the rebels. And they saw Hegel's philosophy as a secret weapon, a method designed to critique and ultimately overthrow those exact same institutions. For a couple of years, this was all just a quiet debate happening in university halls. But then a single book came along that lit a fuse, and the whole thing just exploded into a massive public firestorm that forced everybody to pick a side. The year was 1835. And the book was called The Life of Jesus, written by a young theologian named David Strauss. And let me tell you, this book was an absolute bombshell. So what was so explosive? Well, Strauss argued that the stories in the Bible, the miracles, the resurrection, they weren't history. He called them myths. Now, he didn't mean they were lies. He meant they were powerful, symbolic stories that a community creates to express its deepest hopes. So for Strauss, the real divine truth wasn't in one person, Jesus, but in all of humanity. In a country whose king ruled by divine right, this idea wasn't just controversial, it was pure intellectual dynamite. And you can see how this theological domino immediately knocks over a political one. Because if you start questioning the idea of a single historical divine person, well, you're also questioning the idea of a single absolute divine king. The attack on God became the only way to attack the state. You really have to get the context here. This is 1830s Prussia. Press censorship is everywhere. You couldn't just write an article saying, hey, maybe the king has too much power. You'd be thrown in jail. But you could write a very dense book about theology, and everybody understood the code. Attacking the concept of a personal God who rules over the universe was a not-so-subtle way of attacking the personal king who ruled over the state. The next domino to fall was a guy named Ludwig Feuerbach. In 1841, he drops a concept that would literally change the world: alienation. He argued that God didn't create humanity. Humanity created God. He said we take all of our best qualities, our love, our reason, our power, project them onto this imaginary being in the sky, and then worship it. The result? As he put it, the richer is God, the poorer is man. To be free, we had to stop giving our power away to God and take it back for ourselves. And then came Bruno Bauer. If Feuerbach opened the door, Bauer kicked it off its hinges. He was the most radical of them all. He took this idea and turned it into a weapon. For Bauer, the whole point of philosophy wasn't just to understand the world. It was to destroy it with pure thought. He called his method criticism, and he saw it as a kind of terrorism of pure theory, a relentless intellectual force that would demolish every single external authority, from the Bible to the throne.
So by the early 1840s, the young Hegelians are at their absolute peak. They're loud, they're confrontational, and they're not hiding anymore. And, as you can probably guess, The Prussian state decided it had seen quite enough. It was time to push back, and push back hard.
This is where it was all happening. You had these wild bohemian groups like Die Freien or The Free, who would meet in Berlin wine bars and just try to outshock each other with their atheism. You had influential journals that became the movement's mouthpiece. And you had liberal newspapers like the Rheinische Zeitung, where a very young and fiery editor named Karl Marx was just starting to make a name for himself.
The state's response was swift and totally brutal. In 41, they brought in a rival philosopher with the explicit mission to root out the dragon seed of Hegelianism. A year later, they fired Bruno Bauer from his university job, basically slamming the door on any academic career for these guys. And by 1843, their main publications were all shut down by government censors. Just like that, the party was over. As a movement, they were completely crushed. Without jobs, without a platform, the whole thing just shattered and dissolved, almost as fast as it had appeared. But the ideas they had unleashed, well, you can't censor an idea. And they were about to take on a whole new and much more powerful life. As the movement fell apart, its ideas got even more extreme. Take Max Stirner. He looked at what his friends had done and basically said, "You guys didn't go nearly far enough." He argued that getting rid of God and the state was great, but they just replaced them with a new tyrant, humanity. For Stirner, any big idea that you're supposed to serve, whether it's God, the nation, or even mankind, is just a spook, a ghost in your head. The only thing that's real is you, the individual.
Now, this epic failure forced some to ask a really tough question. If our critical philosophy is so powerful, how did we lose so badly? And their answer was maybe their single most important contribution, the modern theory of ideology. They realized that philosophy isn't some pure truth floating down from the heavens. It's a product of its time, a system of thought that either justifies a broken society or offers people a fantasy escape from it.
But as the movement lay there in ruins, one former member didn't see an end. He saw a beginning. He saw a powerful collection of intellectual tools just lying there in the wreckage, ready to be picked up and put to a brand new use. And that figure was, of course, Karl Marx.
See, Marx was basically a genius at putting these pieces together. From Bauer, he took the idea of relentless destructive criticism. From Feuerbach, he took the master key of alienation. From another thinker, Moses Hess, he learned how to apply that idea of alienation specifically to money and economics. And from Stirner's challenge, he realized he had to ground his entire theory not in abstract ideas, but in the real, material world of class struggle.
It's a direct line. The young Hegelians started an intellectual fire with philosophical radicalism. Karl Marx took the embers of that fire and forged them into the world-changing theory of communism. He turned a critique of ideas into a critique of capitalism.
And just think about that for a second. As an actual, cohesive movement, these guys lasted less than a decade. They were a total flash in the pan. A small group of broke, marginalized intellectuals who were quickly and very effectively shut down by the government.
And yet, their influence is just staggering. Concepts like alienation, ideology, radical critique, these became the building blocks for Marxism, for existentialism, for so many of the movements that defined the 20th century. You could say they lost the battle, but their ideas went on to shape the next 100 years of war.
And that leaves us with one last big question. Their story is this incredible reminder that ideas have consequences, often in ways that no one, least of all their authors, could ever see coming. So if a theological debate in 1835 could set off a chain reaction that led to the revolutions of the 20th century, what intellectual dominoes are falling right now, maybe in some obscure corner of the internet or an academic journal, just waiting to shape the world that we don't yet see?